And Giselle wrote into Spooky Story Time and she was like, I had a really creepy experience with what I think was a creature or at least a non-human entity at a Walmart in Deltona, Florida. It gets really weird. So she said it was like 2 p.m. on a weekday and she likes going to that Walmart neighborhood market because it's in a shopping plaza where she gets food, she gets her pedicures, and then she goes to Walmart and she does all her grocery shopping. So she does her normal errands, then she goes to Walmart and she starts in the produce section. Taking her time, she's making a little day of it. She picks up bananas, garlic, spinach, and then she makes her way over to grab some onions. And after she grabs the onions, she turns toward the apples and she notices that there's this man staring at a green apple, and he's very tall, he's very heavy set, and he has absolutely no hair. And that's not that weird in itself. Some people have alopecia. Never tell a story just because someone looked weird, right? But she said he had no hair, no eyebrows, no body hair. His skin was as smooth as a baby's, and he was also overwhelmingly pale. Wore all black clothing, which stood in stark contrast to his skin. And he's standing there holding a green apple. I got an apple. I have a prop for this video. And he's holding it like this, and he's examining it in the light, and he's turning it back and forth. And then she notices his left eye, because it's about 3 times the size of his right eye. Completely black, and it seems to be protruding out of his face. And so she's standing there like, I've never seen a man that looks like this in my life. And she's looking around to see if anyone's staring at him, and she notices nobody's paying him any attention. She's standing there for a couple minutes and he's still just examining this apple, just turning it back and forth, looking at it up and down, trying to figure out what's going on with it. And finally she gets curious and she walks over to him. Thought he maybe just had some medical issues, but she was genuinely curious what his fascination was with this apple. So she walks over to him and she says something like, haha, I always thoroughly examine my produce too. And he looks at her for a second, then he looks around and he goes, are you talking to me? And she goes, yeah. And he gets like giddy and he's smiling ear to ear. And she said his features seemed too large for his face, but she thought that maybe that was just because he was a very large man. Says as she started speaking to him, she noticed that his left eye, the one that was protruding from his face, had this like inky depth to it that sort of swirled around, and it made her feel comfortable. It made her feel like he was harmless. And he says, what are you here shopping for? He says, oh, just my normal groceries. What are you here for? And he said, nothing really. I'm just here looking around. And she thought that was kind of weird, but she's like, how much weirder could this interaction get? And she goes, well, I've pretty much gotten everything I need from this section, so I'm going to go have a good day. And he goes, can I walk with you? He said nothing about this man made her feel threatened whatsoever. It was the middle of the day. There's a ton of other people around. She's like, sure. So she starts walking through the store. He starts eating his apple and he starts asking her all kinds of questions. He says, how much fruit do you eat? And then he says, this apple is delicious. And she says, yeah, apples are really good. And he says, do you like the sun? Do you go out in the sun a lot? He goes, yeah, I guess so. We live in Florida. And he said, interesting. Do all Walmarts have the same layout? And she goes, I don't know. He asks how old she is, and she says, I'm 22, which is how old she was at the time. And she thought really at this point that he just wanted somebody to talk to, that maybe he was just lonely. And she goes, how old are you? Just to be polite, And he says, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Struck her as odd because he didn't look that old to her, but then he says, where have I seen you before? And she goes, we've never met before. And she's like thinking, trust me, I would remember. He goes, are you sure? No, we've met before. And that started to creep her out. They're still walking aisle to aisle. She's grabbing things she needs, and he's still asking her a ton of odd questions. And she starts to notice that everyone around her is staring. Like, they're stopping and staring, and she goes, this is so rude. Like, who stares at someone that they don't know like this? Starts to feel oddly protective of him, and they're still just talking back and forth. And finally, they get to like a cooler section, and she's grabbing some frozen things she needs. And she notices this family, and they all stop, and they're just looking at her. Then she became aware that people were staring at her, not the man. So she's like, is there something on my face? So she leans in the cooler door to see if there's something on her face. And when she backs up, she realizes that there's no reflection of whoever she's talking to. She turns around and the man is still standing to her left. She looks back in the reflection of the cooler and only sees her own reflection. She turns back to the man and he's smiling and he says, what's wrong? Said she actually blinked her eyes a few times to make sure that she wasn't just like imagining things. But the man standing there, solid as can be, leaned up against the cooler door, and she's like, I have to get out of here. So she's like, I think I've got everything I need. Like, I'm gonna head to checkout. And he's like, cool, I'll walk with you. So she's walking to checkout, and as she reaches the checkout line, she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna get out of here. I hope you have a good day. Do you have any plans? And he says, can I get your phone number? She says, no, I'm sorry, I don't give my number out to strangers. And she's still aware that there's people standing around her watching her. He just says, okay, and he watches her go to the checkout line and start putting her things on the belt. And she's going through checkout, and she's still kind of keeping an eye on him, and he's standing at the front of the checkout line. But she said she wanted to see if he would walk out of Walmart, but he didn't. He just stood there watching her as she checked out. So she goes to pay, and when she looks back after paying, he's gone. Walks out of the Walmart, quickly walks to her car. She's kind of keeping an eye behind her the whole time to make sure that he's not following her. She gets in her car and she locks the doors, and she realizes that 3 hours have passed, and she's like, I only got like 8 items, so how could that much time have passed? I couldn't have been in there for more than 45 minutes. She experienced a range of emotions, but she ultimately decided that she had nothing to do and she was curious about this man. So she drives her car a little bit closer to the entrance and she's watching the door. She parks her car, she's eating her bag of veggie straw. She said she sat there for an hour waiting for him to walk out because she was just curious. She wanted to see where he went, but he never came out. So eventually she's like, I'm going to go back in and see if I can find him. So she walks in, she makes her way through the aisles, but she can't find him again. That she felt very confused and conflicted. She wanted answers more than anything, like who was he, where did he go? But eventually she came back out and she realized the sun was setting and she had an awful feeling in her stomach. So she just drove home and stayed in for the rest of the night. That happened in 2017, but to this day, she still thinks about it because she can't find any answers. She's like, I wonder if it looked like I was walking around Walmart talking to myself, because why wouldn't he have had a reflection? What was up with his eye? Why did I feel some sort of comfort when I looked into it? And why did he say that he knew me from somewhere? She said that's her normal Walmart. She has been there multiple times since 2017 when this happened, and she's never seen that man again. Tells her real name. I'm not sure if she's going to be in the comments or not. Let her know your thoughts.